So good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. It's nice to see you this morning. I'm going to open up with some opening remarks, and then we'll hear from, of course, Aaron and Lisa and Deputy Mayor Washington. I'll do better introductions when I get to that point. What I want to start off by saying is when we took office and our administration really carved out our path toward addressing homelessness, we think that we instilled a sense of urgency, a sense of compassion, particularly to those experiencing homelessness, looking at our parks, looking at our sidewalks, looking at everywhere where unfortunately people have had to live, and to have a transparent conversation with everyone about what's happening in Seattle. We thought the smartest approach, looking at best practices, looking at written literature, was to create what we called a unified care team, bringing together departments, talking to one another, streamlining processes, improving data collection, which becomes critical to describe an issue, but to use data to help inform your decisions, to analyze that data, and then prevent the city, with all of our great employees, prevent them from working in silos, but being able to talk to one another. And I, as many of you have heard me say before, I believe in our city employees. I believe that they are compassionate and they are empathetic, and so we wanted to use our ability to communicate in our One Seattle approach to get this work done. Well, what we've seen, of course, in Seattle is a significant decrease in tents in parks and on sidewalks because of the work we're trying to do, helping people access shelter and make sure that our neighborhoods are welcoming and accessible to all. We've seen significant improvement in how we are responding to people who call or contact the city to report encampments and to address their safety needs. We are collecting better data than ever before, and that's very intentional in the design that we've established. Now, we know that this work we're doing in terms of our homelessness strategies and our public safety efforts, we know that this is on the top of Seattleites' minds, that people come to Seattle amongst some of the other major cities because they want that sense of peace and that sense of safety. In opening up the data and establishing a system by which we can receive forms, we receive about 800 to 1,000 forms a week. And some of these forms perhaps they could report issues that they see, and we work diligently to respond to the needs of the constituents in our city. So our budget reflects our plan to move forward, to draw from lessons learned. And as I said to many of you, at the 6-month review, we really looked internally and externally to see how can we be better. How can I be better as a mayor? How can our administration be better as leaders? How can the city be better as a collective set of employees? And we learned lessons, and we talked about that openly, and the question really became, how can we work more effectively and sustainably? So our budget describes a transition from the unified care team from one citywide focus to geographically based teams. And what that means is such that the teams actually on the ground doing that work, they can be sort of subject matter experts in their particular areas, working with people, working with community-based organizations, working with advocates, and they can sort of take ownership, if you will, in a geographic focus, as opposed to a very general approach where they have to, again, familiarize themselves with a lot of the community-based organizations or other people that might be interested in helping. We also increased staffing for homelessness outreach and relationship building with communities by 150%. And again, this not only improves our effectiveness in terms of the work we're doing, but it helps us improve our data collection and our ability to analyze that data. But I should make this clear and make no mistake that our budget is focused on maintaining the previously one-time funding for these necessary activities. That if that funding is not renewed, that we've been operating on in the past, and it's not made ongoing, this level of service that we're demonstrating will lapse. The progress we're making in this city, building our One Seattle, will lapse. And we want to be open and transparent about that, and that's quite frankly why we are here this afternoon. We know that homelessness deserves a comprehensive and holistic response. I've said repeatedly, there's no one answer. There's no one silver bullet, no one secret sauce to cure everything. That's why yesterday I stood with CEO Mark Dones to announce the Housing Command Center, putting again our resources and our partnerships with HUD, our partnerships with the county, our partnerships with those in lived experience, centering the voices of those with lived experience. That's why our holistic approach in using one of our assets, our Housing Command Center, our Emergency Operations Center, we're using that, putting that in play, if you will, to address this with our sense of urgency. So my budget includes $90 million for the King County Regional Homelessness Center for outreach, shelter, and other critical programs. That's a 13% increase. Funding to maintain current shelters and to create new tiny homes and safe lot spaces. And nearly $250 million, the largest one-year investment in affordable housing in the city's history. I said on other occasions that I wanted to be known as the housing mayor. And it's not me particularly, but our administration wants to be known for this kind of work. And we cannot do it alone. And that's why I'm very proud to introduce a few people that will say a few words after me. We cannot do it alone. And that's going to take advocates, the philanthropic community, the city, the county, the state, our federal resources. When we talk about One Seattle, we're talking about building around a common vision and putting everything in play to get people housed and get them the services that they need. So I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Mayor Tiffany Washington to explain more about our proposal in a little more detail. Deputy Mayor Washington, you have the microphone.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
I'll be working with Jamie here to make sure that we're on the right slide when I'm speaking so that you all can follow along. And so we can go to the first slide where I want to open by sharing a quote from Mayor Harrell's inaugural address. I believe I read this quote every time I am before you because it's something that drives everything that we do on the Unified Care Team. In One Seattle, we don't allow people to suffer on our streets and sidewalks. We will be intolerant not of the people who are unhoused, but of the conditions that cause them to be unhoused. And I start there just because that really is the core of our values when we're working to serve those that are unhoused in our community. When the Regional Housing Authority was created, the city transitioned the responsibility of oversight of the investments in homelessness and strategic planning to the RHA. This year of growth for the RHA has also been a year of growth for the city, as we've had to work to redefine the city's role in addressing homelessness. And here's what we realized. We have to simultaneously improve service response to rapidly house people living unsheltered and coordinate strategies to ensure public spaces are open, safe, and can be used for their intended purpose. The RHA owns the first half, rapidly house people living unsheltered. The city owns the second half, ensure public spaces are open, safe, and able to be used for all by their intended purpose. And we can achieve both. Throughout this year of iterating, we've identified 3 issues and opportunities. First, the work to address homelessness is everyone's job, as the crisis of homelessness affects all aspects of our city, from transportation to economic development, permitting, parks, and human services. So the opportunity was to develop an operational structure that coordinates the efforts of all departments so that we are no longer working in silos. The second issue was the city's role in addressing homelessness changed with the new Regional Homelessness Authority. The responsibility to shelter and house people, which used to be owned by the city, is now owned by the RHA. The opportunity was to focus the city on the delivery of core municipal functions and partner with the RHA to provide a coordinated, comprehensive response to all members of our communities. The third issue is there isn't really a line between what is homelessness related and non-homelessness related. So the opportunity was to be innovative and build a system that responds to the reality of what is happening on the ground. These 3 realizations are the foundation of this approach. What we've built isn't perfect, and there are still many questions left to answer. The UCT represents an ongoing learning process in how the city responds to the top concerns of our constituents. So this year, we focused on 3 goals. Develop a One Seattle structure focused on supporting those living unsheltered through connections to shelter and resources and addressing the impacts in our public spaces, right-of-ways, and parks. The second was to improve the customer service portal. That resulted in the clearing of a backlog of 1,500 unauthorized encampment complaints. The team now triages approximately 150 service requests a day. And finally, we created a One Seattle information system. By bringing together databases from all the departments working on this issue, we're able to better understand the landscape and deploy our limited resources effectively. So we're going to walk through these 3, and then I think we will transition to our next part. So the first one was we developed a One Seattle structure. The quote on this slide is from a constituent, and it represents what the Unified Care Team is designed to address. The quote says, "It seems everyone I have communicated with in city leadership this past week just passes the buck to others. It's not my responsibility. It's not our department. Some of you must know who best can deal with this situation. I'd really like to stop sending these emails and getting upset every time I drive to and from my home. This problem will not go away on its own. It will just get worse." When we came into office, too often our constituents were bounced around between teams and departments. Some of the current systems require community members to navigate through several departments to get an answer, or it requires someone to know someone in a seat of power to get their issue addressed. This was not an equitable system. The UCT was designed to lean into the One Seattle approach, building a system where city teams coordinate behind the scenes to address challenges that require a multi-departmental response, rather than putting the onus on the constituent to figure it out. So this, what you see is the Unified Care Team's, I would say, theory of change. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'll go over it at a high level. So the vision you see is to ensure Seattle public spaces, sidewalks, and streets remain open, safe, and accessible to all. We do that through 3 strategies. First, we understand the landscape. Second, we intentionally respond. And third, we assess and deploy. Go to the next slide. So why did we need this structure? Over the last several years, our city, along with the rest of this world, faced a global pandemic, the effects that we continue to experience every day. As a result of the centralized information system, we now have a coordinated, consistent way to collect data about what's happening across Seattle. This is allowing us for the first time to review this data regularly, to design and deploy systems and strategies to address complex challenges. It also allows us to respond equitably to the needs on the ground. I'm not going to read through all of these stats listed, but here's a few that I'll call out. We have over 800 tents in active encampment sites across the city. Those are our neighbors who are unhoused and need access to support, shelter, and housing that meet their needs. Since the beginning of the year, we have seen over 1,200 fires at tents or RV encampment sites. That's an average of 4 per day. This is a significant health and safety concern for both unhoused neighbors and the surrounding community. These statistics are concerning. And let me be clear, this is not intended to say that people living unsheltered are the cause of crime, but that the conditions that our city currently faces have resulted in an unattainable situation that cannot continue. We have to dedicate our resources to align with our values and work collaboratively to address the conditions that create these statistics. We closed the loop on encampment service requests. This slide illustrates the volume of customer service complaints that our team triages. As mentioned earlier, this year there was a backlog of 1,500 complaints related to unauthorized encampments. At that time, there was no actual customer service system related to unauthorized encampments. Constituents submitted requests, went to the Customer Service Bureau, they were sent to a department, and then the customer received a notification that the ticket had been closed. This created a high level of frustration among community, and follow-up was left to the individual departments. Tickets continued to be closed without any idea if there was going to be follow-up. This is not a criticism of our departments. The department staff do the best they can with the often limited resources they have. But this was a space where we could do better as a city and needed a system that would work cross-departmentally on behalf of the people of Seattle. The mayor made a commitment: build a better customer service system. In response to the community's frustration, we launched the unauthorized encampment service request form to ensure there is a system moving forward to keep customers informed on the status of their request. And this is just a screenshot, and it shows you what it looks like when people go to the website. You can go next. Finally, we wanted to make sure customers were informed. Our goal is to respond to all incoming encampment-related requests in 3 working days and send out crews to inspect as necessary within 10 working days. Status updates are provided to customers at every step until the issue is addressed. For example, the request has been triaged and routed to the appropriate response team. The UCT crews have inspected the location and determined if it's active or inactive. The issue is resolved upon inspection, or the encampment or related issue has been addressed. Of the 4,386 requests in August alone, 4,386, 951 requests were routed for inspection and resulted in staff being deployed to 350 unique locations. So there are 2 key points here. All requests receive a response, even if they're duplicative or no longer an issue. Multiple constituents report the same encampments over and over while awaiting resolution. Crews may have already addressed the issues, and issues may self-resolve. New intake staff are critical to ensuring work is efficient and work orders are addressed. So what are we looking for in 2023? We want to build from what we learned. We are proposing a model for 2023, as the mayor said, that continues the current service levels, many funded through one-time sources. We want to expand services in areas where we have identified a need and focus the way the work is coordinated from a citywide look to smaller geographic-based teams. The proposed path forward builds on 5 key observations. The first is there's not enough places for people to go. This is not only shelter, but appropriate affordable housing. The second is there are a unique set of circumstances for those living in RVs and vehicles, and we need a coordinated effort that is responsive to those needs. The next one is that our housed neighbors want to understand what is happening and they want to help with the solution. Also, we understand that the KCRHA needs time to develop a system that works. And in the interim, we need to incorporate a set of solutions beyond just the removal of sites. And I want to just hone in there. That last one is really important because we have over 400 RVs and 800 tents. We have to have a set of resources that are bigger than the removal of sites. Building on those 5 observations, the guiding principles we are approaching this with are: when a community is informed, involved, and updated, they will have the patience to engage in a person-centered process over time. This process will focus on identifying appropriate resources, deploying strategies that reduce harm, bringing people indoors to spaces that meet their needs, and this equals an approach that takes time and leads to meaningful impact. We've seen this work at Woodland Park and Ballard Commons, and we are collaboratively developing a playbook with RHA to operationalize this approach. So this is the final slide. It's a snapshot of what we mean when we say geographic teams. This is not set in stone, but this is our early thinking that we'll have 4 to 6 teams, 1 per geographic area, that they will build relationships with community neighbors, housed and unhoused, that there will be outreach teams, businesses within the region that all come to the table to work together, and that they will coordinate deployment of city and partner services such as outreach, trash mitigation, RV remediation, geo-cleaning, and then site resolutions. Is that the last one? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That was very informative. We threw a lot of information at you. I asked Jamie Housen to make these materials available to you should you need it. Jamie, I know you're reliving your days in elementary school when you were the AV person. I don't want to
Elementary school.
So Thank you for that. But in all seriousness, we'll make the information available to you. We want to also hear from Aaron Goodman. I'll introduce Aaron a little more thoroughly here. A Seattle native, Aaron came to the SODO BIA from the U District partnership, where she administered the U District BIA and produced the annual U District Street Fair, among other things. She holds a master's degree in public administration, and for those who've worked with Aaron, know she's committed to being an ardent advocate for the SODO businesses and assisting them in developing a vibrant business district in SODO. She's trusted by community, and however you spell community. A little personal privilege here. I met Aaron not as a politician, but I met Aaron working on PTSA work together, raising funds for our schools on the south end of Seattle. And if you've ever worked with Erin, you have to keep up with her pace. And so we are very pleased to have Erin share a few thoughts with us. Erin?
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Over the past 2 years, small businesses have borne the brunt of pandemic uncertainty and the firsthand impacts of issues of increased trash and disorder from unauthorized encampments that were not addressed during the pandemic. Many of these businesses, especially industrial business in SODO, did not have the privilege of working from home. They came to work each day to ensure that our city continued to function. From switching their manufacturing lines from vodka to hand sanitizer, messenger bags to PPE, and to ensuring that food and other goods continued to move throughout the region. Their employees had to navigate the disorder around their businesses just to get to work. Mayor Harrell's early commitment to addressing these issues more urgently, compassionately, and efficiently through the formation of the Unified Care Team has made a visible improvement in the physical conditions in SODO and across the city. This new approach has been effective because of the focus on sustainable solutions in partnership with community groups, BIAs, and other neighborhood organizations. The Unified Care Team has done critical work to clean up trash and litter, connect those experiencing homelessness with shelter and services, and restore access to public spaces, streets, and sidewalks. They are demonstrating change in real time, but there is still a lot more work to be done. It is critical that this level of services and the funding that supports it be maintained. Much of the work to date has been funded by one-time dollars, and we need to support the Unified Care Team consistently moving forward. Allowing the services they provide to lapse would negatively impact our local businesses, neighborhoods, and those living unsheltered on our streets. I'm very excited about the mayor's proposal to shift the focus from one citywide team to several geographically based teams. We have seen in SODO over the last 5 years, through the work of our SODO-based homeless outreach coordinator, that having a local focus works, both for those living unsheltered and for the surrounding businesses. In SODO, we have many small businesses that have survived the pandemic, but are struggling to keep their businesses open, attract employees and customers, all while dealing with the persistent crime and disorder on the streets around them. For economic recovery to continue, our small businesses and neighborhood business districts must continue to grow and be vibrant. Investment in the geographically based Unified Care Team is essential to that growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Our last speaker before we open it up will be Lisa Howard. I think many of you know Lisa. She's the executive director for the Alliance for Pioneer Square, and of course she's worn many hats on behalf of the Pioneer Square. In her current role as ED of the Alliance, she leads a collaborative team focused on business development, advocacy, and public realm improvement. She has strong relationships and with city leaders and key organizations, particularly in the Pioneer Square area. And quite frankly, she knows how to tie those relationships together with the city, the county, and the state from all levels to make sure that this area of our city is a vibrant area. And I want to say that having worked with her, she's truly a team player, a leader, and I'd love to hear a few words from you. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will say I'm not a Seattle native, but I did go to Foster, so okay. I'll take that as my win. I'm here today just as to support the Unified Care team in this conversation and thank Mayor Harrell, his team, and all of the members on the streets every day within the Unified Care team, because I deeply believe in this as part of the solution to our systems that need to be put back in place post-pandemic. This effort is a signal of an investment into our city, an investment into realizing and repeating that this place matters. This place needs to be kept clean for not just people who are able to email in, but for everybody. This work benefits all members of our community. We've seen it work directly in Pioneer Square. You know, the early days of the pandemic, you know, everything felt very destabilized and scary and hard. And I know everyone who has stepped outside of their house has encountered a situation where they see something and they say, who do I call? What do I do about this? How do I get this situation addressed? And sometimes it felt like there wasn't an answer, but there is an answer. And the expansion and the support of this program ensures that there'll be an answer moving into the future at the scale that we need to be able to say, we're proud of this city. We're proud of how we keep this city. We're proud of how we treat the people who may be living on the sidewalks, all the way up to people who visit from out of town internationally. You know, everyone matters here. This, again, is a tool in the toolbox. It's not the surefire bullet to make sure everything is wonderful and perfect in the future, but this is a critical piece of our infrastructure to make sure that our systems are working and we can build upon it to improve not just Pioneer Square, but Seattle as a whole far into the future. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Before we take a few questions, I want to loop back to Deputy Mayor Washington's presentation. I think one reason or one explanation as to why the city are able to do this kind of work is what I simply ask Deputy Mayor Washington to do is one thing: lead. Lead. And we have 5 other executive team members here, and I tell them the same thing. Lead. That part of my job are to establish a vision, to motivate, yes, but also to rely on a core competency in a certain area, and then to some extent get out the way. That's my approach to leading. And what you saw is just a glimpse, a PowerPoint presentation on hours and hours and hours and days and weeks of leading. That's how we're going to get our city back. And so that's why I want to make sure those materials are available to you. But quite candidly, we thought it appropriate right now, particularly during the budget process, that we share with the media and for the community and those that are watching how we're able to get things done. And while I would like to take credit, I say I'd take credit sometimes by getting out of the way, because we have some very effective leaders here at the city. And the employees, I cannot say enough about them, many of whom are here. And they've heard me say the same thing. What do you need to do your job? How can I support you? Because they know how to do this work. And they do it with our values. Compassion. I'm not afraid to use the word love. Treat this person as though you would want to be treated. But also recognize that the city of Seattle are being redefined right now, and a lot of what we do and how we do it will be part of that redefinition. Will we be that city that we wanted to be in 1962 and 2023? A forward-thinking city, a compassionate city, a city where everyone is proud to live in, take pride in that city. And in fact, if we could figure that out here in Seattle, perhaps this country will look at what we're doing and we'll become a stronger country. So you just got a glimpse of it. And as we get through this budget process, we're very hopeful and indeed prayerful that in our One Seattle model that we are aligned with the council and we'll move forward to make this city the city it could be. And with that, it wasn't question time yet. You picked my, no, okay.
I know you're kidding to get rid of it.
All right. You've been to church with me before. Jamie, can you direct the?
Go ahead, John.
Okay. So do you want more one-time money, or would funding this come from the $90 million for the Homelessness Authority and the $250 million for housing?
Well, I will always take one-time money wherever we get it. And my time in D.C. and working with the state, we want to take advantage of any resources we could. But our design on this budget is to make sure the monies we did have on one time is sustainable. And so we shaped our budget to establish a sustainable model for housing people and getting our city back.
Well, but I mean, is that a continuation of the one-time money, or does it fall in the middle of that 340 million homeless and housing money?
Yeah. I would say it's a continuation, if I'm saying it correctly. We would have ordinarily had our budget chair here, but I believe our budget person here, but I believe she's in front of the council. A little busy in front of the council right now. But yes, this is a continuation. That's the thought.
And how much money is it? And how much money is that? How much is the one-time money?
Do you want to go into budget stuff, or do you want
I just need a number.
to? So it's not a part of the RHA money, and it's not a part of the housing money that the mayor mentioned.
Come up to the microphone, maybe. Or give the mayor the number. But I mean, what's the number? What's the one-time number?
Number, or is this the 13?
Let's be sure, because this is going to matter. But what you asked was, is it a part of the money that we're giving to the RHA? The answer is no. And then you asked, is it part of the housing, affordable housing budget that the mayor talked about? And the answer is no.
But the money, the one-time money is what?
It's a mix of fund sources, but a lot of it is from the federal COVID relief dollars.
And then is there a number there? Is it 10 million? Is it 50
Yeah, I'm
million?
not
Is it
gonna-
13 million?
I want to, I'll give you a rough number, but I want to put a little asterisk, but I think it's about $38 million. $38 million is, I think, the number you're trying to drive at, but
To maintain the current service.
that's to maintain the current level of service.
That's not all one-time services, but that's to maintain current services.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then Sarah Grace and then Erica.
This spring, you referred to the Unified Care Team as kind of the answer for how to do a holistic approach to public safety and offer people services. Now it sounds like this may be a shift in responsibilities of that team to focus more on responding to community members who have complaints about people who need services, and like what you said were the basic municipal services. Is that right? And can you explain how you got to that point?
Yeah. So I would slightly characterize it a little differently, that there's no shift in terms of the emphasis on who we're responding to. That what we're able to gather in 6 months is sort of the magnitude of the issue. And it's sort of, I will describe it as such as, yes, we get a lot of complaints, but we also have increasing number of people in the homelessness, experiencing homelessness. So how do we take all this data and act? And what we believe, and I love expression Deputy Mayor Washington said, she says, nothing's etched in stone in terms of the geographic teams, but we think dealing with, and you've heard me say this before, we think that the community, the advocates, the grassroots people doing the work outside of the city and the city, that they could take sort of ownership of the geographic areas. And because we know that in order for it to be sustainable, we want those relationships in place. And it's pretty hard for the same people to go to West Seattle one day and then Ballard the next and then Lake City and then, so we thought establishing those relationships, those community relationships, would help us be more effective. So it was not a shift to respond to angry callers versus an emphasis on housing people. It's just a more effective means to communicate and collaborate with everybody involved. Please.
So just remember, if we go back to the beginning, the mayor asked us to develop the Unified Care Team because we didn't have the data. We didn't have a holistic idea of what was going on the ground. We actually had some of the largest encampments in city history because we just came out of a pandemic. So what he asked for was to create a One Seattle structure to ensure that we can address the concerns from the constituents, the shelter needs of those living unhoused, and trash, needles, RV remediations, again, over 400 RVs. What you saw here was we took what we learned, and I'll repeat, we learned there's not enough places for people to go. There are a unique set of circumstances for people living in vehicles. The community, housed neighbors want to understand what's happening and they want to help. KCRHA needs time to develop a system that works so that we can get more places to go. But in the interim, we need to incorporate a set of solutions that go beyond removal of sites. So if I could pick something that we learned the most of, is that if you don't have enough places to go and you have over 400 RVs and 800 tents, you have to have a set of tools in your toolkit that go beyond removal, that can mitigate issues on the ground so that the community feels heard and the unhoused folks feel like they have hope of where they're going. And so we didn't shift, we learned and we're evolving.
Just to follow up on the question about the budget, if you could send numbers, that would be super helpful. And then I had a question, this might be for Tiffany. There's a slide where you said that you talked about clearing the backlog, and I'm wondering, what does that mean when you say we cleared out this backlog, and what does it mean when an issue is resolved? If you've got somebody, for example, calling 10 times to complain about the same thing.
So it's what Erin had alluded to in her comments, which was we were in a pandemic, we had a shelter-in-place mandate for 2 years. People were calling in and saying, there's trash in my neighborhood, there's 15 RVs in my community, can you guys come clean up the trash and the needles? And for almost a year and a half, maybe, no one could do anything because we were all trying to figure out how to get through the pandemic. So when we came in January, there were 1,500 requests that had gone unanswered for some of them 2 years. And so the mayor asked that we clear the backlog, and what that means is that we reach out to the people, we send someone from the Unified Care Team to do an inspection, and then we resolve the issue if we can, and resolve looks different. Resolve could be RV remediation, it could be hauling away a burnt RV that had been sitting there for weeks. It could mean making a referral to shelters and then resolving the site. And so when we say we cleared it, it means that all of those requests, the 1,500, someone went to the site to do an inspection, put the data in the database, and then we either addressed it or it was self-resolved. So that's kind of an example. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Okay.
And then went on.
Oh, sorry. You had said that you identified that some additional tools would be needed instead of just responding to the encampment. What are some of those tools? And will those potentially be funded in this request?
I think the mayor said it well when it wasn't, the biggest learning was that we needed more tools than a removal. So some of those tools are when you have people on the ground in a region every day. So they're going to be there 5 days a week. They're going to be talking to businesses, partnering with businesses, picking up trash, talking to folks that are unhoused, making referrals to shelter, that over time, so I think a better way, let me explain it this way. Right now, we have a schedule of removals, and we say, okay, in December, we're going to go to this site. And while we're going to that site in December, there are hundreds of other sites across the city. So what we learned is, could we do this work simultaneously and not just focus on the site that we're going to clear in December, but work in the neighborhoods like we did with Woodland, which was a 4 to 6 months process? Where over time, every week, we met with the BIA, the local businesses, the community, and we essentially talked and we learned who the people were. We created a by name list. We started referring people to shelter one by one. And by the time we got to the removal day in Woodland Park, there was no one there. Everybody had went inside. So we want to replicate that in regions everywhere in hopes that we can resolve more sites by being in more places at once, doing the same activities. I'm just going to stay right here.
So, will you be asking for more funding for the Unified Care Team? And when you guys talk about increased staffing for homeless outreach by 150%, how many more positions is that?
So I'm not as smart as some of the money people here, so I'm going to be very careful in how I answer these questions. But the first one you said was about outreach. Who are they? We are going to be asking for more funding, yes.
Through this budget.
And how much more?
That's this money in the mayor's proposed budget.
Which we'll send out. Yep.
And then when you talk about increased staffing for homeless outreach by 150%, how many more positions, I guess, is that? And
Michael Bailey, is it 6? 6 more positions.
And are they specific to anything, or?
They're the resource coordinators, so they'll be the folks on the ground who are basically the catch-all. So they'll be facilitating the community meetings. They'll be making resource connections. They're going to be partnering close with KCRHA so that if there's an offer of shelter needed, and so they will essentially be the conductor of each of the local places.
Will they still be responsible for making those offers of placements in tiny home villages, shelters?
And sometimes that's complex. Remember, KCRHA will be the folks who are primarily responsible for getting people inside. So they will be responsible for knowing who needs to go inside, what their housing needs are, how many people need to go inside, and they will be giving that information to KCRHA and partnering with them to make sure that it happens.
And Sam?
You mentioned that the city's previous approach was too fractured and that KCRHA needs more time to develop a plan. So what tangible changes are people in Seattle going to see from these proposed structural changes and the bump in funding?
So I would say they're already seeing it. And when I first started, there were tents everywhere because people had sheltered in place for 2 years, and there has been a substantial decrease in the amount of trash, needles, debris. Parks are open that were closed for years, and so I would say they're already seeing it. What we're proposing is to maintain what we've currently been doing and to enhance it based on what we learned. And in terms of what we'll gain from KCRHA, addressing a system that's fragmented is right now we don't have good shelter throughput. What that means is people are going into emergency shelter and they're staying for too long. So you have a backup in emergency shelter, which reduces the amount of beds that you have open, so you can't refer people. If you can't refer people, you can't do a resolution at a site. And so KCRHA is currently working with all of the partners to figure out why people are going into shelter and staying for so long. And they're doing an amazing job and are very close to addressing the issue that we call throughput. Once they do that, then we will see more beds available. The second thing they're doing is Housing First strategy, which is a federal best practice, which means everyone does not need to go to the emergency room, which is emergency shelter. Some people can go directly from living unsheltered into permanent housing. And some of the things that the mayor talked about yesterday at the press conference with CEO Dones really digs into that. And so what we realized, remember, they opened in January. So we're all learning how to work together, and we need to give them time to do these system fixes so that we have places for people to go.
Sarah Grace, last question.
What, Mayor?
Sarah Grace is going to ask the question, sorry.
I'm sorry.
You said it's not finalized, but can you explain what factors are going into drawing those zones and about what size each of those teams will be?
So we don't know what size they'll be. What we do know is what they will be comprised of. So they will be comprised of someone who can do RV remediation. It will be comprised of kind of the conductor I talked about. It will be comprised of KCRHA outreach workers. It will be comprised of field coordinators who can do inspections, and they also can store belongings of people. What we're really digging into now, and I have Stephen here, I'm not going to put you on the spot, don't worry. What we're really digging into now is how many, if you go to the next slide, we have to look at how many sites are in each region because they're not all equal. So the number of people that'll be in each of the regions are dependent on the conditions on the ground. And the reason it can't be set is because if you're in downtown and there's 58 sites, when that goes to 28 sites, then that team can shift and go to Southwest Georgetown where there's 74 sites. And so we're trying to be really careful and not saying it's set in stone because we want to remain flexible. And then did you have another question? Oh, what it went into the lines? That's a whole scientific, Stephen, magical process. Do you want to say a couple words?
I would just say we're trying to achieve some balance in the number of sites across the city and dividing it up into geographic areas that seem logical, but not everything else.
But it's mostly driven by number of sites.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And when you say you've almost figured out the problem of throughput, can you elaborate on that?
I haven't almost finished it. Mark Jones? Yeah, so Mark's working with the different organizations. Mark is brilliant when it comes to fixing systems and homelessness. I would defer to Mark on how they are particularly fixing throughput. I would say one of them is going from using the housing first strategy. So if I could channel Mark, I would say we are default sending people to emergency shelter, and what Mark is proposing that we take time to learn that person and see if we can put that person directly from the streets into permanent housing, and that would decrease the number of people that go to emergency shelter. The second thing I think Mark would say is that emergency shelter is supposed to be like an emergency room where you triage people. And what's happened over time is it's just became an emergency room where no one's leaving. And so Mark's really trying to work with the providers to do the triage work within the emergency shelter system to move people out quicker. But that's about as much as I can give you.
Okay, and with that, we're done.
Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it a lot.